Historians secretly know the ancient world wasn't some noble realm of civilized athletes. They hide a chaotic fever dream. You think modern sports are brutal? Try athlete sponsor deals giving Olympic gold to a literal corpse and betting entire kingdoms on a rubber ball. Every single fact here sounds like a drunken hallucination. They are real. 1. Spartans didn't play games to bond. They used tug of war as elite battlefield preparation. Highly trained killing machines treated a piece of rope like a deadly weapon. Dropping it meant you were unfit for actual warfare. They snapped bones and dislocated shoulders just to prove their worth. You grip that hemp until your palms bleed out. Losing meant facing public shame back home. The ancient military crucible makes modern team-building exercises look pathetic. Gary from accounting falls face first into the mud at a corporate picnic and cries about his khakis. These warriors fought until their ligaments tore. They died holding the line. Think about that for a second. The pressure crushed them. Sparta literally turned a children's playground game into a brutal test of survival. They didn't rely on swords, shields, or a premium subscription to a modern fitness app. They just pulled. It's sick. Would Gary survive ancient Sparta? 2. Millions of gallons of water crashed into the arena while doomed prisoners braced for impact. Romans flooded the Colosseum to stage literal naval battles with real warships. They pumped the water in, threw in full-sized boats, and forced thousands of slaves to slaughter each other on the makeshift ocean. The next day, they drained the whole thing for regular fights. They casually swapped environments like a venue manager flipping a switch. An NFL stadium turns into a deadly sea overnight just because the billionaire owner got bored and wanted to watch men drown. Spectators cheered as splintering wood pierced lungs and desperate fighters sank to the bottom. The sheer logistical madness required to drown a packed arena just for an afternoon show defies modern engineering. It shows a terrifying level of arrogant power. They built an artificial sea just to kill people. No modern spectacle compares. Is this the ultimate billionaire flex? 3. Olympic cheaters funded their own eternal humiliation. Officials fined rule breakers to build bronze statues with their names and crimes permanently carved into the metal. Every future athlete walked past a literal monument dedicated solely to your fraud. You cheat, you pay for the bronze, and your family name becomes a laughingstock for generations. A modern quarterback throws a game and society slaps his mugshot on a Super Bowl billboard that lasts 1,000 years without a delete button. You can't hire a PR team to fix a bronze engraving. The ancient Greeks forced you to finance your own public cancellation. They lined the path to the stadium with these towering reminders of failure. Competitors stared at the sculpted faces of liars right before taking the field, absorbing the shame. The psychological damage hit harder than any physical beating. The statues stood there forever. You ruined your legacy. They owned your soul. 4. Spectators casually cheered on the riverbank while their friends fought off 2,000-pound territorial murder beasts. Egyptians jousted on tiny papyrus boats in waters swarming with deadly hippos and crocodiles. Two men balanced on fragile reeds, swinging long poles at each other, trying to knock their opponent into the jaws of a waiting predator. They turned a daily fishing trip into a suicidal arena match. You lose your balance, you hit the murky water, and you immediately become lunch for a snapping reptile. The consolation prize for second place was literally being digested. They chased an adrenaline high centuries before streaming services existed. Modern extreme sports athletes brag about jumping out of planes with reliable parachutes, but these guys tangled with nature's most vicious aquatic tanks armed with nothing but a stick and blind confidence. They bled for the roaring crowd. The water turned red. Sheer lunacy. Would you joust over hungry hippos? Joust over. 5. Romans forced blindfolded gladiators to fight with zero visibility just for comedic relief. Two terrified, heavily armed men swung sharp swords into empty space, while an entire stadium cried with laughter at their endless panic. They tripped over their own feet, desperately slicing the air, hoping to hit flesh before getting stabbed from an unseen angle. The crowd treated human lives like a violent circus act. They took a brutal martial art and turned it into a pitch-black version of Marco Polo just for the memes. You don't get the dignity of looking your killer in the eye. You just hear the deafening roar of the crowd, mocking you as cold steel suddenly pierces your ribs. The emperor sat in his velvet box, sipping fine wine and chuckling at the blind flailing of once proud warriors. They stripped away all honor and replaced it with cruel humiliation. Dying wasn't enough for Rome. They demanded a punchline. It's sick comedy. 6. The pancration was a savage combat sport where the only banned moves were biting and eye gouging. Snapping collarbones, tearing ligaments, and choking someone to the brink of death easily passed the ancient safety check. As long as you didn't accidentally nip their ear, officials happily let you break a man's spine. Two combatants rolled in the hot dust, twisting limbs until they heard a sickening crunch. The Greeks invented MMA but forgot to download the safety regulations patch. Fighters stomped throats and shattered kneecaps while the referee just stood there nodding. You entered the stadium knowing you might leave in a wooden box. Modern fighters tap out when a submission hurts too much. Ancient fighters kept going until their organs literally stopped functioning. They didn't rely on scorecards, ringside doctors, or a sympathetic judge stopping the match. They fought until the body surrendered. It was brutal. Which modern fighter dominates this? 7. Officials crowned a literal corpse with a wreath and erected a bronze statue, giving a dead man a much better career than most living people. A Greek fighter was choked to death, but simultaneously broke his opponent's ankle, winning the prestigious Olympic gold posthumously. The other guy tapped out from the agonizing pain of his shattered bone, right as the champion's heart stopped beating. It remains the ultimate refusal to lose on a molecular level. His insane stubbornness still secured the gold even as his soul left his crushed body. They dragged his lifeless corpse to the highest podium and cheered for a tragic casualty. You can't defeat a guy who doesn't care about his own pulse. He bypassed basic human survival instincts just to spite his terrified rival. The roaring crowd chanted for a ghost. This man ignored death just to claim a leafy crown. He didn't breathe. He just won. 8. Greek long jumpers carried heavy stones to forcefully swing themselves further through the air. They turned a simple jump into a lethal physics equation where dropping the rock a second too late sends you face first into the hard dirt. Athletes sprinted down the dusty track, gripping dense lead weights, launching themselves into the sky and violently throwing the rocks backward to gain extra distance. This human pendulum system treated athletes like expendable lab rats in a high-stakes, gravity-defying trust fall. You miscalculate your release point by a fraction of a second, and your shoulder dislocates mid-flight. They treated human bones like cheap shock absorbers. Instead of relying on fast twitch muscles, they hacked gravity with blunt force objects. You hurl those heavy stones and pray your knees don't snap upon impact with the ground. It requires insane precision. Could you do math mid-air? 9. Willingly becoming a human missile at 50 miles per hour on a surface made of hardened, flesh-shredding lava rock to please a goddess. Ancient Hawaiians raced headfirst down jagged, active volcanic slopes on tiny wooden sleds. They dragged these flimsy wooden planks to the blazing summit, stared down a terrifying vertical drop, and launched themselves directly into the abyss. You turn yourself into a highway-speed human cheese grater. They outclassed every modern energy drink influencer by 2,000 years. One slight bump on that jagged volcanic glass and your skin peels off like wet tissue paper. They didn't wear carbon fiber helmets or padded suits. They wore woven loincloths and rode the razor-sharp rocks with a fearless grin. The coastal crowd watched as these thrill-seekers risked horrific bodily mutilation just to honor the fiery deities. They courted violent death. It's savage. 10. Roman chariot racing fans literally burned down Constantinople over petty sports rivalries. Tens of thousands died, and a global empire nearly collapsed simply because fans of different colored teams had a disagreement in the massive arena stands. They didn't just throw cheap beer cups at the referee, they organized armed militias, stormed the royal palace, and set half the city on fire. A modern soccer club accidentally starts a violent civil war and tries to overthrow the government on a random Tuesday. The terrified emperor locked himself inside his stone fortress, while drunken hooligans slaughtered each other in the streets. They turned a simple racetrack dispute into a catastrophic urban apocalypse. You support the blue team, your neighbor likes the green team, and suddenly you are burning his house down with torches. Sports tribalism reached its bloodiest peak. They leveled a metropolis. Could modern fans topple a government? 11. Indigenous peoples invented a sport where competitors pulled a rough cord with their ears until someone gave up or tore flesh. Two respected adults sat in front of a cheering crowd, voluntarily trying to rip each other's heads off via the earlobes in the name of athletic glory. They looped the string, leaned back with raw force, and tested the tensile strength of their own cartilage. This brutal sport feels like it was invented at 3 in the morning by reckless teenagers losing a drunken dare. It suddenly makes Mike Tyson look historically on brand. You sit there gritting your teeth while your ear slowly detaches from your skull under immense pressure. They embraced excruciating phantom pain just for local bragging rights. Nobody wins a shiny trophy. You just get to keep your ears intact while the loser bleeds all over the dirt. It defies basic human preservation. The agony was the point. It's sheer torture. 12. A cunning Spartan princess conquered the most rigidly male-only event in human history without ever setting foot inside the stadium. She won the Olympics because the wreath went to the horse owner, not the actual driver. The Greeks threw women off a sharp cliff if they even sneaked a glance at the games, but she found a glaring administrative blind spot. She funded the best chariot, hired elite riders, and took all the glory while sitting safely at her estate. She exploited this legal loophole so beautifully that it transcends sports and becomes the ultimate geopolitical power move. The sweaty male champions fumed in disbelief as her royal name echoed through the packed arena. She proved that having immense wealth and a brilliant legal mind easily beats bleeding in the dirt. She hacked the ancient patriarchy with a simple signature on a breeding contract. The furious judges couldn't do a single thing about it. She played them all. Thiach Shi-san. Wait, 13. Training your entire life for a bloody championship where the grand trophy is getting your beating heart ripped out on a stone altar while the crowd cheers. Mesoamericans played a heavy rubber ball game where victorious captains were frequently sacrificed to the gods right after the match. You win the hardest physical contest of your life, the high priest congratulates you, and then he immediately slices your chest open. It stands as the absolute worst employee benefits package ever designed by human resources. Players bounced a solid sphere off their hips, bruising their ribs and risking severe concussions just to secure the holy privilege of dying. The victors truly believed offering their fresh blood kept the sun moving across the sky. You score the glorious winning point and secure a violent one-way ticket to the afterlife. They seamlessly merged varsity athletics with ritualistic slaughter. It's a fatal victory. 14. Ancient Greek officials carried thick wooden rods and mercilessly beat athletes who broke the rules mid-game. A referee completely skipped colored warning cards and just violently thrashed a giant competitor with a stick in front of thousands of spectators. You commit a sneaky foul and an old guy in a robe instantly starts whipping you across the bareback. It constitutes an ultra-efficient penalty system that would instantly cure modern basketball players of faking their injuries overnight. A superstar takes a theatrical dive, and the umpire pulls out a birch branch to give him bleeding welts on live television. They didn't review instant replay tapes. They distributed blunt force trauma on the spot. The players didn't dare argue with the calls because complaining meant eating another heavy strike from the rod. They enforced fair play through raw physical fear. The shrill whistles were replaced by pain. It worked flawlessly. 15. The Japanese game of Kamari involved noblemen gently keeping a leather ball in the air with 0 winners or losers. Heavily dressed aristocrats politely tapped the ball upward, where the only punishment for dropping it is a collective sigh of aesthetic disappointment. A bizarre island of wholesome, dignified cooperation exists in an ancient world otherwise solely dedicated to maximizing bodily mutilation. These guys wore flowing silk robes and carefully nudged the ball to their wealthy friends. Nobody got stabbed in the neck, nobody got sacrificed to a sun god, and nobody lost their life savings on a bad wager. They prioritized graceful elegance over fragile athletic ego. You drop the ball into the dirt and everyone just bows and politely tries again. It feels like a peaceful hallucination compared to the Roman gladiator pits. They found deep serenity in a simple hacky sack circle. They just vibed. Is polite disappointment worse than losing? 16. Greek boxing had 0 rounds, no ticking time limits, and no weight classes. It was just a relentless bare-knuckle fight to unconsciousness. A tiny guy locked in endless combat with a towering giant, fighting until a sweaty body drops, casually disregarding human facial structure. A primitive society viewed a boundless, bloody endurance slaughter as peak civilized entertainment. This perfectly validates the eventual invention of health insurance. They punched each other's skulls for hours under the scorching summer sun. Your hands swell, your eyes swell shut, and the ruthless crowd just screams for more violence. You don't get to rest in a padded corner while a coach rubs your tired shoulders. You swing your fists until your knuckles shatter or the other guy stops breathing in the dirt. It's a limitless marathon of unwelcomed facial reconstruction. They didn't tally scorecards, they counted survivors. 17. Ancient Athens legally tried, convicted, and exiled inanimate objects like a heavy discus that accidentally killed a spectator. A highly educated lawyer passionately argued a complex murder case against a lifeless chunk of bronze, while the guy who actually threw it goes home scot-free. They ceremonially deported a piece of sporting metal across city borders to ensure the universe stays balanced. Think about that for a second. A respected judge bangs a wooden gavel and formally sentences a rogue javelin to permanent banishment. The armed court officers seriously picked up the bloody rock and formally escorted it out of town limits. They blamed the cold equipment instead of the careless athlete. The metal got a fair trial with dramatic opening statements and solemn verdicts. They logically purged the evil object to appease their paranoid gods. The ancient legal system spent real tax money on this circus. It's hilarious. What object deserves a trial? 18. A legendary Roman charioteer survived a deadly track to amass a modern equivalent of $15 billion. Gaius Apuleius Diocles won enough literal cash to fund the entire Roman army, in a terrifying profession where his co-workers violently died on a weekly basis. He beat the horrifying odds of ancient mortality, lapped his enemies in the dirt, and made modern billionaire athletes look like broke amateurs. He didn't sign lucrative shoe deals. He earned his massive fortune by dodging flying hooves and splintered wood at breakneck speeds. Every single race was a coin flip between getting brutally trampled or buying a brand new mansion. He miraculously survived over 4,000 races while rival drivers ended up as bloody roadkill. He retired in ungodly luxury, laughing at the sheer statistics of his own survival. He played a daily game of Russian roulette with angry horses. He broke the bank. Would you risk death for billions? 19. Elite Han Dynasty generals decided that the best way to conquer rival empires is to force grown men to ruthlessly kick a feather-stuffed ball through a tiny net. Ancient Chinese Kuju was an intense, mandatory military training tool for frontline soldiers. Soccer wasn't just a friendly game, but a cheap historical alternative to building an actual military obstacle course. The armored recruits practiced their precise footwork to improve their lethal agility on the battlefield. You get tackled in the thick mud, you fight for the leather ball, and then you apply those exact same physical dodges while evading enemy swords. The strict generals evaluated troop readiness based squarely on a high-stakes scrimmage. They cleverly disguised grueling combat conditioning as a popular team sport. It built endless stamina without wasting expensive armor. They kicked their way to military dominance. Was soccer just cheap warfare training? 20. Romans scraped the oily, dirty sweat off exhausted gladiators and sold it to wealthy women as a premium luxury cosmetic. High society elites happily rubbed the scraped-off biological sludge of a terrified killer onto their faces to look prettier. It stands as the ultimate disgusting ancestor of the modern $40 celebrity-endorsed skincare routine. Bathhouse attendants used a curved metal tool called a strigil to carefully harvest the grime, blood, and dead skin cells right after a brutal death match. They bottled this vile cocktail in tiny vials and charged an outrageous markup. Patrician ladies paid top dollar to smear arena filth on their cheeks, fully convinced it contained the magical essence of virility. They skipped the soothing moisturizer and went straight for the organic gladiator juice. Ancient capitalism eagerly monetized literal bodily fluids. It's deeply repulsive. 21. You destroy your body, travel across the known world, and endure immense physical trauma just to be crowned with a leafy vegetable. The grand prize at the highly prestigious Nemean Games was a fragile wreath made of wild celery. It serves as the ultimate masterclass in keeping arrogant athletes humble. They handed champions a trophy that a modern gym bro would mindlessly throw into a morning smoothie. You train in the dirt for 4 years, you shatter your opponent's jaw, and the judges hand you the raw ingredients for a depressing salad. They didn't offer shiny gold medals or lucrative brand sponsorships. They proudly handed over a wilting green plant. The roaring crowd cheered as the exhausted victor proudly paraded around with a vegan snack resting on his head. They bled out for a dinner garnish. This violently destroys the romantic myth of ancient glory. You literally fought for soup ingredients. It's hilarious. 22. Melancomas won the Olympic boxing title by exclusively dodging and never throwing a single punch. A fighter infuriated his enemies by moving like invisible smoke for hours until they mentally broke down and quit from sheer exhaustion. This remains the most brilliantly lazy athletic achievement in human history, bringing a pacifist glitch to a bloody fistfight. He danced around the dusty ring under the blazing sun, happily letting giant men swing at the empty air until their strained muscles gave out. He turned violent boxing into a frustrating endurance puzzle. He refused to strike back, acting like a mocking ghost haunting the arena. His muscular opponents surrendered not from physical pain, but from profound psychological embarrassment. He broke their fighting spirit without ever leaving a single bruise on their faces. It stands as the ultimate alpha move. He won a brutal war by refusing to fight. He just walked away. 23. Minoans performed deadly acrobatics by sprinting directly at charging bulls and backflipping over their razor-sharp horns. They looked at a furious one-ton beast running at them with lethal intent and decided they should definitely do a sick flip over its face. This ancient society lacked the vocabulary for basic risk assessment, operating with a microscopic 0% margin for error. You stand alone in the dirt, wait for the enraged animal to lower its heavy head, grab the lethal horns, and launch your fragile body into the sky. One tiny slip means you get instantly impaled and trampled into an unrecognizable red paste. They casually treated a deadly apex predator like a wooden vaulting horse. Modern Olympic gymnasts rely on soft padded mats, but these reckless lunatics used a furious living bulldozer. They defied violent death just for a fleeting crowd thrill. It's suicidal gymnastics. 24. The Olympics featured a bizarre trumpet contest judged exclusively on deafening volume and length, not melody. A champion blew 2 brass trumpets simultaneously just to be as obnoxiously, earth-shatteringly loud as physically possible. They gave a literal Olympic gold medal to the guy who ruins the local neighborhood with noise. This historical fact officially vindicates every noisy child in human history. The red-faced competitors stood in the center of the packed stadium and blew until their neck blood vessels nearly popped. Nobody cared about actual musical talent, harmony, or rhythm. They just wanted sheer headache-inducing decibels to shake the bleachers. The winner announced the sporting events, acting as a booming human loudspeaker for the rest of the ancient games. You win by screaming through a brass tube until the audience covers their ears in agonizing pain. They rewarded terrible music. It's brilliant. 25. Emperor Nero violently fell out of his speeding chariot, didn't finish the race, but was declared the grand winner anyway. Terrified Olympic judges used hypothetical grammar to claim he definitely would have won if he hadn't spectacularly failed mid-track. It represents the historical peak of asking the teacher for extra credit, firmly backed by the implicit threat of imperial execution. Nero brought 10 horses to a standard 4-horse race, crashed almost immediately, and still confidently demanded the victory crown. The sweating officials nervously handed him the leafy wreath because telling a bloodthirsty dictator he lost constitutes a terrible career move. He paraded around the capital like a legitimate champion while everyone politely ignored the humiliating dirt on his bruised face. He literally bent reality to protect his fragile ego. The original participation trophy came with a death threat. It's pathetic. 26. While the official Olympic prize was just cheap leaves, home cities gave winners lifetime free food, immense wealth, and torn-down walls. A fortified city literally destroyed its own defensive walls just to flex that they birthed a guy who runs really fast. This ancient lifetime VIP pass turns you into a local god who never has to pay for a warm meal again. They mocked modern sports commercials by offering actual municipal immortality. You win a simple foot race, and your proud mayor orders the military to smash a gigantic hole in the stone fortress just to welcome you home. You dine endlessly at the public expense until the day you finally die. They treated sweaty athletes like victorious warlords returning from conquest. Modern gold medalists get a fleeting shoe endorsement, but ancient winners got a permanent blank check from the city government. You sprint for 10 seconds and retire immediately. It's a sweet deal. 27. Famous Roman gladiators endorsed local products like olive oil through messy graffiti painted on city walls. A professional murderer steps out of a dusty arena drenched in fresh blood, only to have his muscular face plastered on a brick wall just to sell cheap pottery. The dark dawn of the influencer era proves that ruthless capitalism will monetize literally any lethal profession. Fanatical fans bought specific brands of bread just because a guy who brutally decapitated people on weekends said it tasted good. Wealthy merchants painted these crude advertisements across the empire, turning hardened killers into ancient billboard models. You survive a brutal lion attack and immediately pivot to selling imported skincare to the local aristocrats. They seamlessly leveraged horrific human slaughter for everyday retail profit. The endless hustle never changes. It's shameless marketing. 28. Aztec kings were so hopelessly addicted to the ballgame, they would literally bet and lose entire cities and their own royal freedom. A sovereign ruler wakes up as an untouchable god king and goes to bed as a destitute slave simply because a heavy rubber ball bounced weirdly off a wall. This clinical gambling addiction was so profound, it literally restructured borders and empires without a single iron sword being drawn. They didn't bet shiny coins or horses. They wagered fertile provinces, royal titles, and human lives on a single unpredictable match. A bad call by an ancient referee could seamlessly transfer the ownership of 10,000 helpless peasants. They watched the tense game from elevated stone thrones, nervously sweating as their entire kingdom rode on a difficult hip shot. One unlucky bounce permanently ruins your dynasty. They played a ruthless game of Monopoly using real nations. It's insane. 29. Greek boxing tiebreakers involved standing perfectly still and taking unblocked full-power punches directly to the face. They eliminated all defensive strategy and just politely took turns obliterating each other's skulls until someone stopped breathing in the dirt. This remains the most violent game of rock, paper, scissors ever conceived, where the only option is a heavy fist and dodging is fiercely illegal. When a grueling match dragged on too long, the judge paused the fight. They drew lots, and the lucky winner got a free, unguarded swing at the loser's exposed head. You drop your bruised hands, close your eyes, and wait for a knuckle sandwich that could easily snap your neck. No blocks, no weaving. Just raw kinetic energy meeting fragile facial bone. They formally institutionalized brain damage just to keep the schedule moving. It's horrific. 30. Milo of Croton uniquely trained by carrying a growing calf daily until it became a full-sized bull. Then he simply ate it. He casually hauled heavy livestock across a packed stadium to flex on the cheering crowd before consuming the entire animal in one sitting. He effectively invented modern progressive overload gym science by befriending a farm animal specifically to turn it into protein paste. He hoisted the beast onto his wide shoulders every single morning. As the cow naturally grew heavier, Milo grew insanely stronger. He walked endless laps around the track wearing a literal bovine backpack. When the bull finally reached full size, he ruthlessly slaughtered it, roasted it, and ate the whole thing to absorb its raw power. This stands as the ultimate ancient gym bro behavior. He used a farm pet as a living dumbbell and then as a massive post-workout snack. He literally digested his own equipment. It's brutal. 31. A Greek athlete reportedly long jumped 55 feet, overshooting the sandpit outright, a physically impossible feat. The jump was so legendary that nobody cared, it blatantly defied the rigid laws of physics. It became ancient historical truth by sheer cultural stubbornness. They upgraded a standard athletic event into an ambitious, gravity-breaking urban legend that an entire educated society blindly accepted as fact. Philos of Croton jumped so impossibly far, he landed outside the designated area. Modern world records sit around 29 feet, but the Greeks just confidently wrote down 55 and refused to elaborate. They treated written history like a fictional hype reel. You jump far enough, and the official record keepers just invent wild numbers to make you sound like a literal demigod. They shamelessly forge the stats. It's fake news. 32. Greeks and Romans played unhinged, violent ancestors of rugby using an inflated, leather-wrapped pig bladder. Grown men ruthlessly tackled, shoved, and bled over a foul-smelling animal organ with zero protective gear and zero apologies. Ancient athletes would look at modern armored rugby players and find their clean, sanitized ball quite adorable. They called this brutal game harpastum. You grab the dirty bladder and sprint while 20 large men try to violently break your ribs. They punched faces and stomped on throats just to advance the squishy organ a few feet forward. Seriously, it looked far more like a disorganized prison riot than an actual regulated sport. They rolled around in the deep mud holding the raw inside of a slaughtered farm animal. The relentless physical violence was the only actual rule on the field. They viciously brawled for a bladder. It's nasty. We need to stop for a second. My lungs are burning just talking about this endless madness. Look at what we have covered so far. We have blindfolded gladiators swinging at ghosts, exploding earlobes, and reckless people willingly sliding down active volcanoes on wooden toothpicks. I'm not making this up. It's exhausting just reading the history. But out of all this unhinged lunacy, there is one undeniable winner. The ruleless Pancration officially takes the bloody crown. Ancient society literally looked at public murder and said, just don't bite anyone, and you are good to go. It represents the historical peak of ancient absurdity. They stripped away all weapons, iron armor, and basic common sense, leaving just two mortals trying to violently dismantle each other's skeletons for public amusement. It serves as the darkest reflection of human nature packaged as a Sunday afternoon spectacle. But before we leave this bloody circus behind, we have to ask one final question. What actually happens when an ancient athlete wins the ultimate prize? 33. Diagoras of Rhodes literally died of sheer joy while being carried on the shoulders of his two Olympic champion sons. His heart stopped from the hype. Ancient sports possessed no logic, zero safety nets, and no lawyers, just raw, unhinged, suicidal glory. We evolved past the blood and the pig bladders, but we lost the god-tier drama. Go to the comments right now and name the modern professional athlete who would survive the longest in the ancient Pancration, where only biting and eye gouging are illegal. Explain why. The best answer gets pinned in the next video.